Hello, Tim here. Welcome to my channel. Today's episodes are going to be a little bit different today because I'm going to take you on a shop tour. But the shop tour will start in the garage, and this is where I take bigger projects and move the cars out. Usually 2 cars are parked in here. But when I start out, my tools are scattered in various places. I have some out in the shed, and important tools like the chop saw and that is kept out there. But they're not tools I use all the time. So when I need to set up something, and if I need a bigger space, I start in the garage. And one of the things I learned for a company I worked for a while back, to set up a quick bench, these laminated out of 3/4 inch plywood, these laminated beams and then a piece of plywood thrown on top makes a pretty solid bench. And I have longer ones over here that are 8 feet, 6 feet, and I've had different ones, and I can lay them out and make a great bench work surface, or you can turn them up on end and make it a little bit taller. But that's just temporary. So then these get put away, and the sawhorses usually sit outside behind the shed. Some of my tools are antique. I've had this for many years. This is a Schnitzelbank, and we'll talk about primitive tools in another video. This here saw is my table saw, which is very portable. I've used it on other videos, but I can move it outside, I can move it in here, I can move it in the shop. So I really like this one because of the portability, but it is underpowered. And I had a bigger saw that's in storage now. And I've downsized from what I used to do. This wall got moved back, and I had a lathe down here, and I had a chop saw and all kinds of stuff set up there. But that's all changed now. So now I have some of my tools like this edge sander I keep it parked out here. In this corner here is my carved sea captain. And I did that years ago in trade school, and you can watch that story about that guy in another video about life-size carvings. Down here I have some of the parts of an antique bench that I'm going to be working on, and some of my wood storage is here. Some of my wood storage is up above here. And then I have some other tools underneath this area here. My wife has claimed the top of this for her gardening stuff and general utility. So I try to keep some order. So generally this is kind of kept pretty clean. And I have my little shop back there. So let's come in the shop. So this is my shop. So come on in. On the left here, you've probably seen this in other videos, but from floor to ceiling, it's 10 feet tall there, are my reference books. I have design books and how-to books and different things. And I draw inspiration from these for some of the carvings I've done and wood turnings and furniture, a lot of stuff. So I know where to find certain things that I want to look for. On this cabinet here is got all my wood carving stuff in it. So on the top I have files, rasps, and this one's a Japanese one. And top drawer's got some pencils and design stuff that I use. French curves and templates. I have drafting machine equipment, which I used to use all the time. Spoke shaves, fret saw. This is all my sharpening stuff. And down here is more of my wood carving, which if you're looking at a previous video, I talk about all my carving tools. That's the title of it. So I show all these different ones. And down below is my whittling kit and other things down there. So that's my wood, pretty much all my wood carving stuff is in that there. This here, there's my strops are here. Some of just old belts that I use. And this area here is the background for all my videos. This I really enjoy. This is a Stanley 45 plane, which I have a complete set for that, which I've used from time to time, but not that often. It's a fun tool to use, but it's a little labor intensive. This is a bench here that this top is part of my main bench. It was cut off from there because I had to shorten it for space. But this has worked out really well because I can put the leg vise on here. I have a hold down device here so I can clamp down work pieces. And this is the same height, so if I have a long piece of wood, I can lay this across here, clamp it down, and I can belt sand or work on whatever I got to do. And this allows me to do some wood carving at a little bit higher, which you've already seen in some previous videos. This is a future project here that I'm going to be making a shelf for under a big screen TV out of white oak. Here's an extension cord that I can pull even out there if I need to. This is running on a separate circuit than some of the other circuits in here, so I don't pop a breaker all the time. In here I have drill bits and some sanding drums and my chucks for the lathe in here, spade bits. Now I used to have all this stuff up on the wall and I could just go to it and pick it out. And it looked kind of interesting, but it was kind of cluttered and it would collect dust and all that. And I just put things away so that it's kind of has a little bit more open feel. And that's kind of the way I want the shop to be, so it's kind of multi-purpose. And you think, well, why don't you have dust collection set up? I used to, and having all the workstations, I used to have it that way. But now when I'm trying to work in a smaller space, I just take the time to set up for a particular task, like the table saw out there, or bring my chop saw in from the shed, that kind of thing. Anyway, this is where most of my work has taken place as far as joinery. I have a vise on both ends. I can crank out both sides and clamp in a board that's quite wide. I can, if it's a round top or something, I want to hold something, I can route on it. Now I got a vise on this corner here. Under here is it's an old Snap-on tool chest, and I have inside here paint colors, mostly acrylics and some oil base and brushes. This is all for touch-up work and decorative finishing if I need it. Some dry pigment colors that I use to mix in with shellac and things like that. Over here, on this side, I have a bag with all my electrical tools in there. So if I have just something that's for doing some kind of electrical stuff, I have all that kind of stuff in there. Some of it's duplicate of what I have elsewhere. This is my portable tool bag, which is really useful for if I'm going to go out of town or go to somebody's house. I have pretty much everything I need here. Some things I can do plumbing, or some things I can do electrical or carpentry. But I don't usually use this stuff in the shop. It just stays as a kit. This here is an antique, I think it was from a hardware store, small parts place. Small parts cabinet. And I restored it, and now after so many years, it looks like it needs to be restored again. But some of that's just a dye that drizzled down here, but it looks kind of cool. It's got antique knobs and old hardware. Got screws and bolts, nails, brads, different things. So I've enjoyed this thing just for organizational purposes. On this side here are my layout tools. That's a meter stick. Well, it's inches and metric. And trammel points, all this kind of stuff, which sometimes I use for bigger layouts. This is a supply cabinet that I keep most of my, all my paints and all that. It's 1 inch thick plywood, so it's, some time ago I had to make a fire approved cabinet, and 1 inch plywood qualified according to the fire department at the time. So paints, I got shellacs, some varnishes, some sanding supplies. These are my glues. These are my solvents. These are my dyes, aniline dye, steel wool and vinegar, which I talked about in one of my videos about finishing an antique mirror. And that's some painting supplies there. I like shellac quite a bit, so I do use that. And these are shellac flakes that I mix up with alcohol and make, they're in these bottles here. And it makes a really nice polish. And it's easy to work with, I think, if you do it right. Everything's easy if you do it right. This here is kind of nice. So these are all my small parts. I didn't really want to dedicate a whole drawer of these things, but I have, shelf pins and these here, buttons, screw hole buttons, wire nails. I have cut nails. I have dowels, all in a one roll-out drawer. Up above, I have a biscuit joiner. These are Makita tools, belt sander. This is just small bits of plywood and some veneers that I just, if something becomes too much in there, then I cull through it and throw away some stuff, so I'm not collecting too much. I want to keep it from getting too bulky. This is probably my most used saw because I don't have my chop saw always set up. This one's always set up, ready to go, so if I have to do a quick cut on something, doesn't matter if it's particularly accurate, I use the bandsaw. But this is very useful for wood turning, cutting things, making bowl blanks and things like that. So the bandsaw, and then my levels there. So we're going to go into the mini museum here. And what I have in here, I sit here and do a lot of planning. This is kind of like open storage of most of my antique tools. And up here I have old planes. I have a whole collection of antique saws, and I won't get them down, but the antique saws are ones that have carving on the handles. They're decorative. And I have different brands, different makes of them. This one I bought new in trade school, and I use this one probably the most. And the other ones belong to my grandfather. I mentioned about a drafting machine, and this is a Vemco drafting machine, which for doing drawings you can move it around. I very seldom use it now. I used to use it all the time. I have some brace and bits. I have a certain amount of planes, and I still use these things. This plane was my grandfather's, and some rabbit planes. This is one of the smallest planes I have, which is a little trim plane that my grandfather had. And this is my maker's mark I have here. It was custom forged by a friend of mine. And some other planes. So over here, I have some antique tools. This one is a forged hammer. And this is a froe that I had made recently that I use, and this is the mallet for it. And I'll demonstrate how the froe is used in another video. And over here is some paintings my grandfather did. And he did these bird carvings. I have 4 of them. And that's what inspired me to do what I've done. So I got a workbench here that's built in. And I got scroll saw there. And some other work that I've done in the past. This is an enlarging machine that I use for looking at detail, or maybe trying to read the grain of a wood or small print in an old drawing or something like that. This here, my main tool chest, which has got wrenches at the top, screwdrivers, miscellaneous router, more miscellaneous stuff, sanders, routers, pneumatic tools, air nailers, which I don't use as much anymore. I have an air compressor outside. I don't know if you saw that, if it matters. This is all my hammers and mallets. These are my measuring and marking tools. A lot of them are antique, which I still use. And my Fordham tool, rotary carving tools. This is my multimeter, other stuff. And the lathe. This is probably the main thing that I do, is lathe work. And this is the only thing that really doesn't get moved around at all because it's too heavy. Right now I have it set up for disc sanding. But I have just some of the tool rests and there's some of the face plates that I've made up custom with a bolt on a washer welded. I use these quite a bit. And my lathe tools are in this little low cabinet. So I have gouges on the top and scraping tools here and chisels and parting tools in the bottom. In this tool chest here, I have my chucks. And I do talk about those in a previous video. These are my dividers and compasses and calipers and other lathe dead centers and live centers. More chucks. A small joiner there, and then I just recently acquired this vintage joiner. And the thing about having so much floor space here and why it seems like, okay, why you can't get at my surface planer, for example. But it's kind of like, do you need a surface planer all the time? No. And so to save space, I'll just move the joiner out of the way and pull the surface planers on rollers, pull it out and plug it in, and then I can do what I got to do, set up and collect the dust and all that, and then put it back. So it's not ideal. It's not for everybody that would want to have a shop set up with a dust collection system and everything accessible all the time. I dreamt about that. I've seen a lot of dream shops where everything's stationed and everything's, able to get at real quick. But that's kind of a dream, and I'm thinking that, it's a little more time to set up and do some work, take it out, put it back, and all that. But to me, to pay for a big space and a lot of overhead, this works out really well. So if I'm just going to do turnings, that's all I do. I'll get the planing done and then put it away. The drill press, same thing. I can move this out. And behind there's a drum sander for shaping things like chair rockers or canes or something that's irregular shape. And then in the corner there's my clamps. So I have that all organized on this clamp tree thing. I've got probably every size of these little hand screw clamps all the way up to number 4, which is huge. They're big. And that's at the bottom under there. These are number 1s. They're all stamped. This is like 4/0. So I use these spring clamps a lot. And I like the Bessie clamps. In Jorgensen on this side, I have pipe clamps. Those 2 clamps there, I've had for a long time. I bought them back. I sold them and I bought them back. They're 8-foot clamps. Those are 6-foot, 4-foot. And I used to have probably twice that. But when I was doing a big job where I had to do a lot of glue up, they come in really handy because I could glue up several blocks and set it aside, especially for turnings like legs or something like that. But I'm not doing that kind of production now. So they're just, they're here. I have them in this bag here. I have C clamps. I have spring clamps. I have some strap clamps. So just here's kind of a fun tool that I don't get to use much anymore, but this is a scaler. So it's just a quick way of telling how many board feet you have in your board. And if you do it right, you can really scale up your lumber. If you're quick at it, you can tell how many board feet you have, as you're buying your lumber, and maximize. That's what I used to do if I had a tabletop to make and I wanted to not be shorted on board feet. The only problem with walking around the lumberyard with one of those, people think you work there and they want you to scale their lumber, and I had to say, no, I don't work here. I'll just take a quick word about this. This I made back in 1974 out of pallet lumber, and I took apart an old skid. You can see saw marks in here from back then, and I've had it ever since. I think it's mostly ash. This is the bench top part of it. The other parts of it are outside. One more thing I'm just going to mention up on top here. I have extra storage up here, and that's one of the reasons I built that little office space there, so I have some support for holding lumber up above. And a lot of the wood, some of it's brand new wood, and some of this wood is recycled stuff that from antiques or something like that. Right in the center there's some burls, and I just recently, a couple of them are up there. I just put up there a couple of weeks ago, and they're drying inside here, and I'll turn bowls out of them eventually. Some of that wood is apple and birch and cherry. Back in those banker's boxes is pretty much my history of wood, like 40 years of jobs. And sometime I think I'll just kind of go unpack some of those, because there's some interesting jobs from the past. Some pine and yellow poplar and different woods. It's a little bit hard to get at some of the stuff that's way back there, but one thing, you can't see it too much. I have some really wide boards there. This here, where the filter is, that's a dust collector, air cleaner, I guess I should call it. And that's kind of it. Otherwise, dust does get everywhere, and it does take some time to clean up. So that's my shop. And if you see something you'd like to have further explained or had a question, I'll be happy to respond. Leave a comment in the comments below, and please subscribe and give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time. And thanks for watching.